Hey everyone, my name's Justin Kim, and here with,
Shawn Boonstra.
and this is Unscripted. This is the Adventist Review flagship main show, talk show, all things variety
Game
show,
show.
game show. And in
I
this
didn't get a
episode,
buzzer, though. I don't have a buzzer. I
and
need
in
a
this
buzzer.
episode, we're going to be talking about sex, so you don't need a buzzer for that. Sex is a big topic, and for some of you, you may be feeling a little like, why are they talking about that? But you're still watching this video. Sex is a topic that should be talked about in church, should it not?
Right. And that's why we're in the auditorium today instead of
Of
in
the
the
general
studio.
conference,
in the general conference to represent the subject. We should be talking about this
Yeah,
in church.
yeah.
And unfortunately, in the West, this might be true wherever you live, but in the West, the Victorian period had some things that were appropriate. There's an old urban legend that they actually put skirts on the legs of pianos in the Victorian period so that you didn't look at their legs and get wrong thoughts.
Wow.
Yeah, that might be urban legend. Go Google that, see if you find any truth to that. I was taught that one as a kid. But out of that came this attitude that human sexuality is somehow shameful, it's dirty, we don't talk about it. And that's not biblical. It's not biblical to say this is not, God created this as a part of the original design for
Do you
humanity.
think there's a little bit of like the dualism there, that anything that's spiritual is good, anything dealing with the
Yeah.
flesh and the body that's evil? So
I'll bet that's right.
eating is bad and sex is bad. And there's a lot of deviant forms of sex that the Bible talks about and it abhors, but sex was created by God. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I was listening to a Jewish professor. Well, he was a Christian professor with a Jewish background, and he was saying, "Yeah, those of you who want to fast on Sabbath all the time, that's not Sabbath keeping."
Mm,
He said, food is a part of who you
it's
are.
good.
And as Seventh-day Adventists, we have a holistic view of the nature of humanity. We are a one whole. It's one of the things that really attracted me to
Yes.
this message. It's like, finally, that makes sense. I don't float away when I die. This is me. This
Yeah.
body is me. And so everything becomes an act of worship. Working is an act of worship. I'm putting my physical talents to work for God's glory. And eating becomes an act of worship. I'm taking care of something that God gifted to me to use. And sex isn't, I think you might be right. I think, if you take a Greek view, which a lot of early Christians did, as we get to the 3rd century, they're moving into the desert as ascetic monks and they're refusing to eat. They don't want to get married because that's the body and carnal desire. And I bet you're right. I bet there's some Greek
And
dualism.
there's a certain necessity to reattach sex and eating and some of these physical, and you even mentioned work, which I really appreciate, labor.
Yeah.
There is a spiritual component to these things as well.
Yeah, there
And
is.
in Adventism, we kind of make fun of our diet and about what we eat and what we don't eat, but eating should be a spiritual exercise. Labor and the work that we do for 6 days a week should be a spiritual exercise. And I would say even sex, sexual activity, there is a spiritual component
there
to
really
that.
is. Not without, we don't want to sound like we're getting into Eastern mysticism. I know a lot of Eastern religions have actually sacralized sex, where
True.
the sex act itself is a spiritual insight act.
You're
like I'm thinking,
transcending
oh
something,
yeah, no,
something, yeah.
tantric stuff and that kind of thing. No, that's not what we're talking about. But if this is part of God's design and my life belongs to God and my purpose or one of the key purposes for my existence is to bless God, to worship God, to enjoy God, these are all gifts from Him and it should be used in the appropriate way. And so, sex. And here's what I think is a big point. You mentioned earlier, we should be talking about this in church.
Yeah.
I agree. And if we don't want to talk about it because somehow we blush or we find it awkward, push through that a little bit. We're not talking about salacious talk at all.
Yeah.
We're talking about appropriate biblical
We're not talking
talk.
about the mechanics of it. We're talking about the theology behind it, the scriptural teaching about it. Scripture has a whole book, Song of Songs, dedicated to it.
Very saucy. A very saucy book. Here's the point that I want to make, though. Listen, parents in particular, if you don't discuss it, if our churches don't discuss it, there is no shortage of information for those young people. They will learn about it somewhere. They will.
The internet.
Yeah. In the old days, they learn about it out in the farmyard or whatever,
You're right.
when parents were too afraid to talk about it or learn it from their friends.
Right.
Now it's the internet. You don't want your kids learning about this from their friends. I mean, how many 13-year-olds have straight thoughts on this subject? None. But the internet isn't doing any favors. Every marketing is based on sex. It's all the wrong kind of information. I actually heard a Christian street preacher the other day. I forget his name. He's fairly popular online. And he was discussing human sexuality, and he says, we're all perverts. And it's like, people, what? He says, yeah, my wife doesn't like me saying it this way, but we're all perverts because to some degree or other, we've all perverted in our sinful condition the original design somewhere, whether it's just being selfish about sex,
Okay.
or he says, a lot of men have a wandering eye. That's a perversion. That's not supposed to be that way, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So to some degree, he didn't mean you're a pervert in
Right.
our classic or our sort of contemporary slang sense. What he meant was, yeah, okay, so here we're gonna, yeah, I messed up like at the worst possible moment. But in a slang sense, no, I don't mean that.
But understanding of
But we've
sexuality is
perverted,
not as ideal
Yeah.
as it could
he
be.
just meant we've perverted
Yeah.
our ideas, and he
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
appealing to a young crowd saying we've all perverted it somehow.
Yeah.
All perverted it somehow, which is true.
Now, one question that we get at the general conference. So we work here at the world headquarters, and all the departments, we got ministerial, we got children's ministry, women's ministry, we got Sabbath school. Yay, Sabbath school. We got all these departments, and there's this one question.
Yep.
This one question overshadows every other question. Questions about state of the dead, about Bible questions, about investigative judgment, about ministry, about discipleship. One question is
All right.
like, this question is
Yeah.
here, and all these other questions are like down here.
Okay, pause for half a second. See if you can guess what it is. We're just going to wait. All right, write it on a slip of
The
paper.
question is,
Yep.
are adult physical extracurricular activities between married people, sex, is that allowed on Friday night? And we get this around the world.
Or after church.
This is not a North American question. It's not a European question.
Not
It's
just
not
Friday,
an African question.
just
It is not a Latin or an Asian question. It is a worldwide
question. Not just Friday night, by the way. Let's broaden this. After church.
Okay,
Afternoon,
so the
whenever.
holy hours of the Sabbath. Is it permissible?
Is
And
sex
so
okay on
we
Sabbath?
have a question. Shawn, tell us about this
Well,
question.
okay. I sent that question up to the Biblical Research Institute. I said, you know what? Let's let them wear this one. And Clinton Wallin, he writes our column for us. There's a BQA, and we had, is it okay to have sex on Sabbath?
One of our famous columns is BQA, Bible Questions Answered. This was done by Angel Rodriguez for decades, and he recently retired, and now Clinton has taken this up, and he was willing to come up to the bat, which is an American idiom. He was willing to take this question on and answer it from Scripture.
Yeah, so we should make you just subscribe to the magazine and go get the article. But all right, let me ask you. According to the Biblical Research Institute, Justin, is it okay to have sex on Sabbath?
Well, he says here the Bible doesn't say directly. It doesn't condemn it or forbid it either. But he does give us some clues on what Scripture points to. And I think the premise, is very important, is that God is the author of sexuality. Sexuality in its ideal form was given in the Garden of Eden to Adam and Eve and was meant for all things good. So there's nothing, we just have to take that layer of, hey, sex is bad. You got to take that layer off and view sexuality from that perspective first.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I don't want to throw the answer right out there, but you know what? I'm just going to say you ought to read this, and you ought to read it because, gentlemen, you're going to love the BRI. Let me just put it out there. Let me just leave it there. I heard someone.
And many women out there as well.
Yeah,
but we just want to say happy Sabbath. Okay? That's
okay, let's unpack it a little bit more. I've done a lot of premarital sort of counseling with couples that want to get married. I won't conduct a wedding unless I have at least 4 to 6 sessions with the couple ahead of time.
Awesome. Premarital counseling.
Yeah, always do that.
Yeah.
And the point of that is not so much that I'm going to decide not to do the wedding. I'm just ensuring if I'm going to preside over this covenant, and it's a solemn covenant, if I'm going to preside over it, I want to make sure that at least the couple understands the issues of marriage, that they are going in eyes wide open.
Sure.
If they find points of disagreement, then they know about them and they move forward anyway. Right. And this question always seems to come up. When we get to the sexuality part, sometimes I'll sit down with the guy, and maybe my wife will sit and visit with the girl who's getting married.
Genders and have some heart-to-heart talks.
Because I'm not going to give advice to a woman and vice versa. That seems inappropriate.
For sure.
But this question comes up all the time. What about like sex on Sabbath? So let me give you, this is not Scripture, but the Boonstra response has been, I don't suppose Adam sat. He gets presented his wife Friday afternoon. There she is, most beautiful woman ever made. Does he sit under a cold waterfall till Sunday? Does he sit under a? All right, and that I will just tell you, that's not the answer that you get from the Biblical Research Institute. But I think you might find some affirmation you might like.
Well,
Yeah,
Clint does point to the commands that God gives to this couple is one, be blessed, multiply, be fruitful. And these are all sentiments, all commands that revolve around sexuality. So there's nothing inherently evil about sexuality, and that we don't want to impose post-fallen ideas into what happened in the Garden of Eden
and
either.
again, yeah, we don't want to import this idea that it's shameful or dirty or that we giggle about. I mean, we all giggle about it. Let's just be honest about it. Most people will giggle about it, and often out of discomfort. Um, but we got to set aside the idea that it's dirty. We do want to examine what have we done to this that took it down from where God intended, that
Sure.
damaged it. But beyond that, there's nothing dirty here.
Yeah. Maybe if I could rewind, maybe could it be that God has given us Sabbath and sexuality as these two dual institutions from of Eden, and that Satan has done everything to dirty these two?
Yeah, that's
So
good.
Sabbath is just like, it's just this it's a Jewish thing, it's a culture thing, or it's Sunday, that whole debate. And then we have sexuality, which is like, no, you do not want to get anywhere near that. But these are two wonderful gifts that are from paradise.
Yeah, they all. And God intended them to be a blessing, to
Mm,
bring joy, to bring glory to his name.
mhm.
And so there's nothing inherently wrong with it. And I will say this, whatever we're discussing here or whatever you find in the article, you do need to follow your conscience. If your conscience says don't, then don't.
Right,
Don't do this on
right.
Sabbath. But if it doesn't, there are biblical grounds for, and I think we ought to just respect each other's decisions.
Sure.
Like don't preach at other people about this. Well, I don't do that on Sabbath. What's wrong with you? It's none of your business what someone
Mhm,
else does on Sabbath. They each
mhm,
need to find their own. I will say that in Jewish culture, it's considered more blessed on
mhm.
Sabbath. It's a bigger experience. Why? Well, if you look at it carefully, the Bible again and again and again, Ephesians chapter 5, compares Christ's relationship to the church, that level of intimacy, to the intimacy that you find between husband and wife, that level of emotional connectedness and so on. So done right, it is a mirror
Mm,
of our bigger emotional relationship to our creator.
mhm,
And so if it's godly and it's not about self, then it's respectful and it's celebrating this gift from Eden. The
mhm.
two gifts, I like what you said, these two gifts from Eden. There's nothing particularly wrong with that. And again, if you're not comfortable, then don't. I think
Yeah,
there's something to be said about violating your own
for
conscience.
sure, for
Come to
sure.
your own conclusion, study it.
There's also Dick Davidson, a former professor of Old Testament at Andrews University. He wrote a book called Flame of Yahweh,
Oh
and
yeah, that is a
analyze
thick
it's so
volume.
thick.
Yeah, yeah.
And he looks at a Song of Solomon,
Yep.
and he says in the union between under the confines of marriage and between male and female, monogamous and of appropriate age, that the two, when they engage in physical intimacy, is the grounds of which the flame of Yahweh from the Shekinah glory, a droplet of the Shekinah
Oh my
glory
goodness.
is presented before man and woman. Like
Yeah. You're
it's
welcome for all the book sales.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. Like, this is a very holy thing that God has gifted, and Satan's doing everything to break this up. So not male and female, male, male, female, female, or not under marriage, open it up for three, four, five, or not human, human. Just every other combination of sexuality, except for the biblical formula, is what Satan is trying to promote there.
Years ago, I met up with a friend. He heard I'd become a Christian. I'd gone into ministry, and we sat at a cafe. We caught up in a city where he happened to be living, and I was in town. And he said, "So tell me about your faith." And he
Mm,
got around to this question, and he said, "So I've broken up with my wife. I've got a new girlfriend. So really, nothing before marriage? We don't do it before marriage? Like, really?"
mm,
What would you answer?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but he wanted more meat than that. It's like,
I,
yeah,
I
well,
I would
but he
say
wanted to
that,
know why.
yeah.
Why is this a rule?
I think two things. One is that sexuality is not a physical need.
Right.
People think eating is a physical need. You need to eat, you need to breathe, you need to drink water, but no one has died and on their tombstones has died because he exploded, or whatever
Refrain.
it is,
Refrain would be the,
from
yeah.
abstinence. it is a desire, and it's an okay desire to have. But second, that this, I would say, this flame that God has given from the Shekinah glory is so potent that it needs to be protected by the confines of marriage. And how much have we seen in society of this flame that's gone awry and has burned people from all different expressions? So marriage provides that protection against the dangers of this also.
Well, and we've also now, we keep studying more and more. And what I find fascinating is the more science we uncover,
Mm,
the more it actually speaks of a creator rather than the opposite.
okay.
So you've probably heard in circles that about oxytocin.
Mm,
We actually discovered, I think, in 1903, a guy I sort of loosely met once, Paul Zak, actually did most of the research on this at the turn of the or in the late 20th century. And it's this chemical that is a trust chemical. So they've observed if there's a lot of oxytocin present, and say, I ask you to give to a charity, and there's a lot of oxytocin in the mix somehow, you are more likely to give. You're
uh,
more likely to trust. And this chemical, this hormone, shows up for nursing mothers. It's
mm,
why that bond of the first nursing is so powerful,
mm.
and why the infant mother bond, as much as men love their kids too, there's something in
So
that
something
first
special
year
about that.
about that. It's
Yeah,
tighter, it's
yeah.
closer.
Mm,
And that is also present in a sexual relationship.
mhm.
And what I find fascinating, and you Google it for yourself, don't take what I'm saying, trust but verify, because I'm doing this by memory. Um, but from what I understand, women produce a lot more of it
Okay,
than men do. We
okay,
both do.
okay.
So you create a chemical bond, an
Yeah.
emotional chemical bond with somebody, and you go sleeping around and you wonder why you end up emotionally scarred. It's
Mm,
because you were designed
mhm.
for that intimacy. And then you have to wonder if women do produce a lot more of it and the emotional aspect is even deeper for them, it might help explain why guys tend to be dogs more often. We
Mm,
we have an easier time moving on to another woman
mm,
than a woman has moving on to her. It's
mhm,
much more deeply emotionally connected. It is for men too. Both get hurt. Both get hurt. But knowing what we know about
mm,
that pair bonding now, um, that's designed for in a covenant, a
mhm.
permanent covenant, because there are scars. There are scars. It's maybe not the same, but there's some analogy here. When someone goes through a divorce, look at the emotional
Yeah,
turmoil. This is not a
totally.
divorce, but there is a bond there beyond just, oh, she's pretty. There's a
Yeah.
bond beyond that that you have ripped at your own heart with
Mhm.
in its design. And if it's to mimic our relationship to God, He gives us a covenant relationship. He doesn't back out. God keeps the covenant. In fact, God keeps the covenant so well that when we violated the covenant as a human race, He becomes human and keeps our end of it too.
Mm,
That's how important it is to Him.
mhm,
The marriage covenant is supposed to mirror that. It's
mhm,
not casual.
mhm.
Sexual
Point
relationship
to
is
that.
part of that
Mhm.
emotional bonding, the deepness of that relationship, and it's not meant for outside of a covenant
Yeah.
relation. It's meant for permanency.
Yeah. And I would say, and I love what you said, it was intimately designed for intimacy. I love that word designed. We were sexually designed. And if, we are sexual beings, why not look to the creator of these beings for the instruction manual on how to get the most premium experience? And I would say that
Yeah.
Adventists who believe in the Bible
Yep.
should have the best sexual experience out there if they're looking to the creator for those
There you
instructions.
go. That's just it's another subject for an evangelistic meeting. There you go. Night number 27.
Now, some
Yeah.
of you may be wondering, like you're hearing these two guys talk about sex at the General Conference World Headquarters, and you're thinking about, doesn't Isaiah 58
Yeah.
say that on Sabbath you shouldn't have sex? And I know, and then we have an article just for you. This is something
Yay.
that Siku, our other associate editor, and
Yep.
myself, we put this together on a Bible study on Isaiah 58, and you are referencing verse 13.
Yep.
Verse 13 says, If because of the Sabbath you turn your foot from doing your own pleasure on my holy day, call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and honor it, detest desisting from your own ways. Anyway, if you're an Adventist, you probably grew up with this verse, as I did. Don't do any pleasure. Pleasure means sexual pleasure. Therefore, God's saying don't do sex on
All right.
Sabbath.
Exegete it for me.
Yeah.
Exegete it for me, Dr. Kim, because I've heard people make this argument,
Yeah.
don't do your pleasure on my holy day. And I've used this passage a lot with brand new believers,
Okay.
not on the sex front, but just to say, well, how do I keep the Sabbath? And
Yeah.
what I tell them is like, we don't have a list of rules.
Mm.
That's legalism.
Mm.
What you do is live by principle, and here's one of them. Is this about your relationship with God, or is it about you?
Mm-hmm.
And I use this passage there.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you now read this?
Yeah.
I think, and you need to read the BQA column. It's got solid biblical arguments for why it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if your conscience says no, don't. But there are solid biblical. How do you reconcile these now?
Yeah. So if the English does what it wants to do. It doesn't really follow the Hebrew. I've looked at different Bible versions and they all kind of they go with the flow of the translation. They don't exactly look at the Hebrew word. So in verse 13, it says, from doing your own pleasure, that word for pleasure is hefesh. Hefesh, and you got to get down there for the real pleasure. Hefesh. But call the Sabbath a delight. And that word for delight is oneg. Oneg is not your blood type. It is the Hebrew word for feasting and for having real joy. So then if God is saying, don't do your own hefesh, and we automatically attribute pleasure with sexual pleasure. But if you go to the beginning of the chapter, verse 2, the Lord says, they seek me day by day and delight to know my ways. And that word for delight,
Wow.
guess what?
Hefesh.
Hefesh. And then it says, they ask me for just decisions. They delight in the nearness of God. That word for delight is again, hefesh. Verse 3, behold, on the day of your fast, you find your desire. The word for desire in Hebrew is hefesh.
It's starting to sound like a theme in this chapter.
So if I just make it really, really, really simple, is like these guys, these Jews, they were taking hefesh, taking pleasure on approaching God, praying to God, and doing religion in the way they wanted to do. And God's blasting them because later on he's like, you should do the fast that I want. Go feed the hungry. Instead of spending Sabbath and sleeping all afternoon, go out and do something for the people who are suffering out there. And then he concludes with this verse 13, on the Sabbath, don't do your own hefesh, but keep the Sabbath a delight. Make it a big joy.
I feel like I got to give you a lozenge after 7 hefeshes.
Anyway, it's very clear that the Bible text has nothing to do with sexuality.
No, it really doesn't. And so reading the entire thing, it gets into fasting, oppressing your workers, and God's calling out everything, but there is no explicit mention of sexuality. That's correct. But still, I think it's still worth exploring. My pleasure on Sabbath. I would argue that if our sexuality gets closer to the original Edenic model, the way we were created, and I don't know that we'll ever completely get back there on this side of glory. I don't know.
Sure.
But in the original formula, was any of this about my pleasure? Is that the way God is designed?
Right.
Is God designed to take care of self first or somebody else?
Right. So the argument is kind of funny, is like, hey, any other day you can have your own pleasure, but on Friday, don't have your pleasure. That doesn't make sense. I think what you're pointing to is that anytime sexuality should be not about the selfish gratification, but about serving the other.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm pointing to you. I'm pointing to my wife. Serving the other.
Please don't point at me again. I'm very uncomfortable suddenly on this show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's one thing that I find interesting is this is really difficult ground to navigate when people are becoming believers. I've spent a lot of years on the road working with couples, and we live in a culture that is now 1,000% at odds
With the culture around us.
1,000% at odds. I mean, I don't envy young people today trying to navigate this subject because 90% of the information that they're getting is the wrong information. And so I have there's an entire generation coming up that doesn't see the problem with just shacking up, living together. They don't see it at all, and I have to navigate that one a lot. And I found that when if you're working with somebody giving Bible studies and this comes up, let me just give this piece of advice as an old evangelist. A little humor, appropriate humor goes a long way. If you get tense and defensive and argumentative, you're going to lose this generation. They genuinely don't understand. So, I had one guy, I'll call him Jeremy. Let's protect him a little bit. So I'm visiting with them and they start coming under conviction. Hey, my girlfriend and I are living together and we don't feel that's right anymore based on what we're learning in the Bible. I said, no, you're right. You're right, Jeremy. It's not right. I said, okay, we're going to get married. I said, that's awesome. He said, in 6 months, when we can invite our family and everything. I said, okay, in 6 months. And he says, in the meantime, I've decided I'm going to sleep on the couch in the living room. for 6 months. You're already laughing. Like every man laughs when I tell the story. And I get quiet for a minute. I thought, what do I say to this one? So I got up from the couch. I stood up and I took 6 big paces. Boom, boom. He says, what are you doing? I said, just a sec. I'm checking something. And it was six steps to the bedroom door. And he's like, what are you doing, preacher? I said, well, at 2 a.m., that's not very far, is it? He starts laughing because he knows, everybody knows in their heart. I said, I'll tell you what, I've already lined up a bunch of guys and we have a truck. We got a place for you to crash till you can have a wedding. We could get you legally married this week and have the big wedding later, a big celebration, but you need to move out. It's the sense of humor that got it there. You don't break people, you break the ice. That's that's an appropriate method with anything. And I do this in every evangelistic campaign. I tell guys, let's start a fund. Let's get first month's rent for somebody who needs to move out. If they're not going to be able, some people can't get married. They're married to somebody else. We'll offer a moving truck, a couple of strong guys, and first month's rent and a deposit, and we will take care of you and get you doing the right thing. Your job is to help people
it's a supportive infrastructure for that. Yeah.
Build the first step in the right direction, a sense of humor every time. And this will paint you into a corner occasionally.
Well, we talked about a lot of uncomfortable stuff, but hopefully it's been efficacious to you. And if you want to read more about sex, don't go to your supermarket tabloid, but go to the Adventist Review, the June issue, where we look at the biblical understanding of sexuality.
It's interesting that we put that in June. Isn't that the big wedding month?
Is it?
I think, and that's a pagan tradition. You want to complain about, if you're one of those ones that likes to complain about everything with pagan roots.
It's also Father's Day in North America. Happy Father's Day to you all fathers out there.
Yeah. And it's Father's Day just about everywhere, I think, isn't it? They do that more than just in America.
They do in other countries.
And pastors just once, maybe on Father's Day, do a sermon about good fatherhood without saying, "Hey, this is your opportunity, guys, to do better." I hear that one a lot. Just don't do that anymore. Give us one day.
Notice that Mother's Day Sabbaths are usually Mother's Day weekend.
Oh
with
yeah,
a brunch.
Flowers,
Friday,
kids,
Saturday, Sunday.
kids
it goes
choir,
and then for Father's Day, it's like an hour.
Yeah, here's your tie.
Here's your flashlight. Here's your compass.
Oh, the compass was cool.
But we love all you mothers out there. We love all your fathers out there. And may you have a great June. My name's Justin.
And I'm Shawn. And this has been Unscripted.
Unscripted.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today for Unscripted. We invite you to check out all the other offerings from the Adventist Review online 24 hours a day at adventistreview.org.